They arrived at Hollow Moor on a silent December afternoon, when the sun, pale as a corpse, hid behind the eternal fog that clung to the marshes. The carriage moved slowly along a muddy road, flanked by gnarled oaks and half-drowned reeds. The silence was thick, broken only by the creaking of wheels and the horses' labored breathing, animals that seemed uneasy, as if they sensed they were crossing into a place where time refused to move forward. Their destination was the Witherell Estate, the ancestral home of a long-forgotten lineage, shuttered for over 70 years, swallowed by vines, stories, and fear. Inside the carriage, 4 figures travelled with different intentions but a shared fate. Alistair Witherell, the legal heir, was 38, a lawyer of impeccable reputation, rational, sceptical, weary of the world and the debts left behind by his cursed family name. He had come to Hollow Moor with a single goal: assess the estate, sell it to a London industrialist, and sever all remaining ties to the legacy he had always carried like a burden. Beside him sat his younger sister, Edith Witherell, 32, a nurse and a failed writer. She insisted on accompanying him, not for profit, but for curiosity. She had always been drawn to forgotten places and whispered legends. Perhaps she hoped the mansion held the story she had long searched for. Opposite them were Henry, their 13-year-old orphaned nephew, and Mrs. Calloway, the elderly governess with steel-grey eyes and a posture as rigid as ever. She had served the Witherell family in London since the siblings were children. "Are we close?" Edith asked, peering out the window where the fog made everything indistinct. Alistair consulted the old map he'd received from the Yorkshire Land Records Office. The hill just ahead, past the bridge. It should be there, if it hasn't collapsed. Henry leaned forward to see, but spotted only shadows in the mist. "Why was it locked for so long?" he asked. "Why didn't anyone ever come back?" Mrs. Calloway replied before Alistair could. "Some doors were meant to stay closed, young master, and some houses shut themselves when they've seen too much." Edith smiled. "Perfect. That's our first line for the book." The carriage crossed an old stone bridge that trembled under its weight. The scent of wet decay and dead leaves thickened. Below, the river was motionless like a mirror, reflecting a sky too heavy to fall. And then it appeared. The Witherell Manor, still and looming atop the hill, a scar carved into the landscape. It was larger than they expected, 3 stories of soot-darkened stone, tall windows with broken shutters, a solitary tower crowned with a shattered bell, and a wrought-iron gate marked with the family crest. A scale, a serpent, and a wilted flower. Henry shrank into his seat. "The house. It's staring at us." No one laughed. The carriage jerked to a stop. The driver hopped down quickly, cast a nervous glance toward the manor, and unloaded the luggage in silence. "Mr. Witherell," he muttered. I won't stay the night. I'll wait in the village. There are warmer inns there, safer ones." "As you wish. Be back at 8 tomorrow morning," Alistair replied, handing him a few coins. The driver vanished before the last word had left his mouth. The rusted key turned with difficulty in the lock. The metallic click echoed like thunder. When Alistair pushed open the twin doors, they creaked and groaned, revealing a dark foyer where time had not passed, only gathered. The air was thick with dust, rot, and something else, the scent of old grief. Chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, tangled in cobwebs. A cracked mirror loomed on the left wall, distorting their reflections. Straight ahead, a grand staircase rose like a wooden spine, and portraits, generations of Witherells, watched them from the walls with eyes that seemed wet. "No signs of vandalism," Edith murmured. "It's untouched, like it's been waiting." "And it has," said Mrs. Calloway, "because no sane soul crosses this threshold without being summoned." Alistair exhaled sharply. "Enough dramatics. Let's light some fires, open some windows." Tomorrow the appraiser arrives. Then we can leave this place behind." But none of them moved at first. It felt like the house was breathing, slow, deep, inhaling their presence. That night, they slept in separate rooms, but none of them truly slept. Henry claimed he saw someone walking past his door at 2 in the morning. No one was there. Edith heard whispers through the walls, Latin phrases and muffled thumps, like fists pounding from beneath the floorboards. Mrs. Calloway lit 3 candles, whispered old prayers, and locked her door with a crucifix tied to the knob. It was as if she knew this house far better than she let on. And Alistair dreamed. He dreamed of a dark courtroom filled with cloaked figures. A massive scale stood at the center, trembling. Behind it, someone whispered his name again and again until it became a scream. He awoke with blood trickling from his nose. And when he looked in the mirror, there was something standing behind him. But when he turned, the room was empty. In the morning, they learned the tower bell had tolled during the night. "The bell's broken, isn't it?" Edith asked Mrs. Calloway over breakfast, the fire barely warming the cold stone walls. "It is," the old woman said without looking up, "and that is what troubles me." The morning light did little to soften Hollow Moor. It crept reluctantly through the fog, pale and diluted, seeping through the tall windows of Witherell Manor like an unwelcome guest. The light revealed what darkness had hidden. Not relief, but neglect. Dust lay thick upon every surface. The wallpaper sagged and peeled like shedding skin. The air felt stale, unmoving, as though the house itself resisted change. Edith was the first awake. She sat at the small writing desk in her room, staring at a blank page while her hands trembled slightly. She told herself it was the cold. She told herself it was exhaustion from travel, but deep down she knew better. She had not slept. Every time her eyes closed, she heard the whispers again. Voices sliding just beneath comprehension, brushing the edges of language like fingers trailing across glass. Sometimes they sounded like prayers, other times like accusations. She rose and crossed the room, her boots echoing too loudly on the wooden floor. The mirror above the wash basin caught her reflection, stretching it oddly. For a brief moment, she thought the face staring back at her wasn't quite aligned with her movements. She touched the glass. The feeling passed. "Get a grip," she muttered. When she opened her door into the corridor, the house greeted her with silence so deep it rang. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Portraits lined both walls, dozens of them, some enormous, others small and intimate. Men in dark coats and powdered wigs, women in severe dresses, hands folded tightly in their laps, children posed stiffly, eyes far too knowing. All Witherells. Edith walked slowly, studying each face. Many bore the same sharp cheekbones, the same dark eyes. Some smiled faintly, most did not. As she passed one particularly large painting, a stern man with iron-grey hair and a judicial robe, she felt it. That sensation again, being watched. She stopped. The man's eyes were dark brown, unremarkable, painted flat, lifeless, and yet. Edith stepped back. The eyes followed, her breath caught. She moved left, the gaze adjusted. She moved right, the same. "No," she whispered, "that's impossible." She reached out and touched the canvas. Cold, dead, still watching. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around, heart racing. Henry stood at the end of the hall, rubbing his eyes, his hair rumpled. "Aunt Edith, you're up early." She forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep. Bad dreams." Me too," he said quietly. "The house talks at night." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" Henry shrugged, but his eyes darted nervously toward the portraits. "It doesn't use words. It just remembers things out loud." Before Edith could respond, Alistair's door opened. He looked worse than she felt. Dark circles under his eyes, his usually immaculate hair disheveled. "You're both awake," he said flatly. "Good. We need to talk." Breakfast was a somber affair. They gathered in the dining room, a cavernous space dominated by a long oak table scarred with age. The fire crackled weakly in the hearth, failing to chase away the chill that clung to the stone walls. Mrs. Calloway served tea and bread in silence. No one mentioned the bell, no one mentioned the dreams, until Alistair finally did. "The bell didn't ring because of the wind," he said, staring into his cup. "I checked the tower at dawn." Edith stiffened. "You went up there alone?" "Yes. And before you ask, no ropes, no mechanisms, no draft strong enough to move it." Henry swallowed. "Then how did it ring?" Alistair's jaw tightened. "It didn't ring, it told." Mrs. Calloway froze. Her hand tightened around the teapot until Edith feared it would shatter. Slowly, deliberately, she set it down. "That bell," the old woman said, her voice low, "was last heard on the night of judgment." Silence followed. "Judgment," Edith repeated. Mrs. Calloway folded her hands. "In 1821, 3 members of the Witherell family were tried in this very house, not by a court of law, but by their own kin." Henry's eyes widened. "For what?" "For mercy," she said, "and for the lack of it." Alistair pushed his chair back abruptly. "Enough. This is exactly the sort of superstition I refuse to indulge. Whatever happened here happened long before any of us were born." "And that," Mrs. Calloway replied softly, "is precisely why it hasn't finished happening." Later that afternoon, Edith explored the East Wing alone. She told herself she was gathering material, notes, inspiration. The truth was simpler. The house was calling her. She felt it pulling her towards certain rooms, certain corridors, as if invisible threads were tightening with every step she took. The air grew colder the farther she went, her breath beginning to fog. At the end of the wing, she found a locked door. Unlike the others, this one was newer, reinforced. A heavy iron keyhole sat beneath the faded carving. A scale tipped unevenly. She tried the handle. It opened. The room beyond was small and windowless, illuminated only by a narrow shaft of light from a ceiling grate. Shelves lined the walls, sagging under the weight of leather-bound books, journals, dozens of them. Each spine bore a name, a date, Witherell after Witherell. Edith reached for the nearest volume. As soon as her fingers touched it, the door slammed shut behind her. The light flickered, and from somewhere deep within the walls, the house began to whisper again. This time, she understood the words. "Read." Edith didn't move. The door had slammed shut so hard, the dust from the ceiling floated down like ash. Her fingers still rested on the spine of the journal, the name etched in faded ink. Nathaniel Witherell, 1821. She hesitated. The whisper, "Read," had not come from outside the door. It had come from within the room, or worse, from the books themselves. Slowly, she slid the volume from the shelf. The leather cracked under her touch. The pages were yellowed, ink faded but legible. She flipped through the first few entries, daily life, mundane notes. And then, December 20th, 1821. The bell tolled last night. Father said it was the storm, but we know better. The clock struck 13 just after midnight. The judgment draws near. I heard Mercy whisper through the walls again. She is not gone. She is never gone. Edith froze. Mercy? December 22nd, Uncle Edward refused to confess. He screamed of justice, of pride. But the house knows, the blood knows, the bell has tolled for him. Tomorrow we perform the rite. Whether he believes or not, the walls will not forgive. Edith turned the page, heart pounding. There were sketches, diagrams, symbols, circles of salt, markings on doors, and a name written over and over again, ink thick and angry. Mercy, 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 Blackthorn. She felt the room shift. The temperature dropped. A breeze touched her neck, yet there were no windows, no open vents. Then, a low creak behind her. She turned. The door was open again. And just beyond the threshold in the hallway stood a child, not Henry. This child was pale, drenched as if from rain, though no rain had fallen. Her dress was torn, her hair matted, and where her eyes should have been, there was nothing but black. The girl raised one hand and pointed behind Edith. She turned. The shelf of journals was empty. Only one book remained, the one in her hands. The rest were gone. When she looked back at the hallway, the girl had vanished. Alistair sat at the old study desk, leafing through maps and property documents, trying to stay grounded, trying to stay sane. The sun was sinking already. Shadows grew longer across the floorboards. He hated how loud the house was in silence. Every creak of wood, every groan of settling stone felt loaded with intent. Then something caught his eye. A document tucked inside a drawer. Not legal papers. This was parchment, aged, fragile, a family tree drawn by hand. He traced the branches, witherals going back generations, lawyers, judges, clergymen, until he found it, a severed branch, a name crossed out in thick black ink, Mercy Blackthorne, 1770. Next to it, a note scribbled by another hand, erased by fire, condemned by name, let no child bear it. Alistair rubbed his eyes. He wasn't superstitious. He wasn't afraid of legends, but the line chilled him, let no child bear it. He thought of Henry, of how the boy had said the house spoke at night. Suddenly, a sound shattered his thoughts. A crash from the east wing. He leapt up. When Alistair reached the hallway, Edith was standing there, white as a sheet, clutching a book. "What happened?" he demanded. I was in the journal room," she whispered. "The door locked, then opened, then—" She looked past him, towards the portraits. Something was here. They both turned to look, and saw it. A portrait had fallen, a large one of an old matriarch in widow's black. But that wasn't the strange part. The portrait had not simply fallen. It had been torn from the wall, its frame splintered, glass shattered, and scrawled across the canvas in something dark and wet, "She never forgives." The fireplace refused to light in the dining room. Every time they struck a match, it flickered and died. "Mrs. Calloway finally said what no one wanted to admit. She's waking." Alistair snapped. "Who? Mercy? A ghost? Come on, this is nonsense." But even as he spoke, the candle flames flared, as if reacting. Then a sound echoed from upstairs, a deep, slow knock. Then another, then three. "Someone's in the attic," Henry whispered. "No one's been up there in decades," Mrs. Calloway replied. Edith stood. "Then it's time someone went." The knocking came again, slow, measured, as if whatever stood above them was not in a hurry. Each knock vibrated through the bones of the house, traveling down the walls, through the staircase, settling into their chests like a second heartbeat, one that did not belong to them. No one moved. Henry clutched Edith's sleeve. "It knows we're here." Mrs. Calloway closed her eyes. "It has always known." Alistair swallowed. "I'm going up." "No," Edith said immediately. "Not alone." They armed themselves with what little the house would allow, a lantern that flickered more than it burned, a rusted fireplace poker, and Edith's journal tucked under her arm as if it might offer protection. The stairs to the attic were narrow and steep, hidden behind a door so warped it barely opened. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with the smell of damp wood and something older, iron, mold and decay that had soaked into the walls over generations. Halfway up, Henry stopped. "I don't think we should go higher," he said. "Why?" Alistair asked, forcing calm into his voice. Henry looked up the stairs. "Because it's counting." They froze. "Counting what?" Edith whispered. Henry shook his head. "Us." The attic door stood ajar. That alone was wrong. Mrs. Calloway swore it had been sealed since before Alistair was born, nailed shut after the incident. No one had opened it in decades. The lantern light revealed a vast, sloping space, cluttered with broken furniture, trunks, and covered shapes that resembled bodies under sheets. The ceiling beams were black with age, warped like ribs. And there, at the far end, a door. Smaller than the others, narrow, reinforced with iron bands. Scratches marred the wood, not from outside trying to get in, from something trying to get out. Edith felt her stomach twist. That wasn't here before. Mrs. Calloway's voice trembled. Yes, it was. Henry stepped forward before anyone could stop him. As he did, the lantern flared violently, casting shadows that writhed along the walls. The scratches on the door began to bleed, fresh, wet. Alistair grabbed Henry's arm. Enough. We leave, now. The door knocked from the other side, once, twice. Then a voice, soft, hoarse, unmistakably human. Let me tell you what they did to me. Edith's knees nearly gave way. Mercy, she whispered. The iron bands on the door began to frost over. The voice continued. I was not a witch. I was not wicked. I was inconvenient. Images flooded Edith's mind, visions not her own. A young woman dragged through mud, a crowd, firelight, accusations screamed by mouths twisted with righteousness, a child crying somewhere nearby. Mercy's voice cracked. They called it judgment. They called it mercy. The door shuddered. Mrs. Calloway fell to her knees, sobbing. Forgive us. A laugh echoed through the attic. Not cruel, exhausted. There is nothing left to forgive. The temperature plummeted. Frost crawled across the trunks, the beams, their breath turning to mist. Then the knocking stopped. The door fell silent, and the attic went dark. The lantern died. They stumbled down the stairs in pitch black, guided only by panic and memory. The moment they reached the second floor, the lantern relit on its own, calm and steady, as if nothing had happened. But the house was different now, heavier, as if something had shifted from sleep to awareness. Henry collapsed onto a chair in the corridor. Edith noticed dark marks forming around his wrist, thin, finger-shaped bruises. Henry, she whispered, who touched you? He didn't answer. He was staring at a portrait across the hall, one that had not been there before. A young woman, dark hair, pale skin, a rope scar faintly visible around her neck. Her eyes met Edith's, and she smiled. That night, Edith read the journal again. A passage she hadn't seen before now burned dark against the page, the ink fresh. When mercy speaks, the house listens. When the house listens, it remembers. And when it remembers, it demands balance. Below it, a final line appeared as she watched. The children will pay first. From somewhere deep inside the manor, the bell tolled again. Once, twice, 3 times. Henry screamed. After the third toll of the bell, silence reigned in Hollow Moor. But it was not the peace of sleep. It was the breathless quiet of something watching. Henry had stopped screaming, but he hadn't spoken since. He sat curled in a chair by the fire, eyes wide, fixed on something none of the others could see. Edith knelt beside him, gently stroking his hand, whispering fragments of lullabies she half remembered. His skin was ice cold. We need a doctor, she whispered to Alistair, who stood near the window, staring out into the fog. There's no one who'd come, he said. Not tonight, not to this house. Edith looked at Mrs. Calloway. There must be someone in the village. But the old woman was already shaking her head. They abandoned this place long ago, after what was buried, after what refused to stay buried. She turned to the fire and tossed in a bundle of dried herbs from her coat pocket. The flames hissed and flared green. You knew, Edith said. You always knew what this place really was. Calloway didn't answer. She only whispered a prayer in a tongue Edith didn't recognize. At some point during the night, the manor shifted. It wasn't just the wind or the storm outside. The architecture changed, subtly but undeniably. Doors led to rooms that weren't there before. Hallways lengthened, mirrors appeared where none had been. At 3:33 a.m., Alistair opened a door he believed was the pantry and found himself back in the portrait hall. At 4:12 a.m., Edith lit a candle in her bedroom and watched her reflection blink out of sync. And Henry? Henry began to speak in another voice. Edith sat beside him when it happened. He had been silent for hours, breathing shallowly, eyes fluttering in and out of focus. Then, in a voice too calm, too deliberate to be his own, he said, "They took my name from the records. They burned it from the books. But I remember. I still remember." Edith's blood turned to ice. "Henry?" He looked at her. But it wasn't him behind those eyes. "I was 11, just like this vessel. They said I carried her blood, and so I was erased." The fire dimmed. Shadows moved independently of the flames. "Who are you?" Edith asked, her voice shaking. Henry smiled. "I am no one. I am everyone they buried under silence." Then he collapsed into unconsciousness. Back in her room, Edith flipped frantically through Nathaniel Witherell's journal. More pages had appeared overnight, entries that hadn't been there before. December 24th, 1821. The child is still missing. No one speaks her name. Grandfather says to let the swamp have her, but I hear her crying through the floorboards at night. I hear the ropes creak when I close my eyes. And then, December 25th, midnight. The bell tolled again. They say it was the wind, but I saw her. She stood at the end of the hall, rope around her neck. Her eyes were gone, but I knew it was her. Her lips moved. I think she forgave me. I don't think she forgave the others. Edith sat back, her hands shaking. A name kept returning. The unnamed. Whoever she had not been Mercy. There was another victim. Another silence. The next morning, the group discovered a new room. None of them had ever seen it before. Even Mrs. Calloway swore it hadn't existed. A sitting room at the end of the east wing, decorated not with tapestries or portraits, but with coffins. Empty ones. 7 of them. Each carved with the Witherell sigil, each lined with rotting velvet. Edith moved closer, breath catching. Each coffin bore a plaque. One read, Alistair Witherell, 1862-1890. Another, Edith Witherell, 1866-1890. And the last, Henry Witherell, 1877-1890. The dates were wrong. Or were they? "Is this some kind of joke?" Alistair snapped. "Some family tradition?" "No," said Mrs. Calloway. "It's a warning." She stepped into the room, ignoring the cold. They built coffins ahead of time. For those the house marked, for those who carried the name. Then she pointed to the 7th coffin at the far end of the room. It had no plaque, no markings, just a smear of dried blood on the inside lid. "For the unnamed," she whispered. That night, Edith dreamed again. She stood in the flooded marsh. The moon overhead was red and swollen. In the water, dozens of dolls floated, their porcelain faces cracked, their dresses soaked in black mud. One doll turned to look at her. Its mouth opened. "They took my name," it said. "But I remember. I remember every time they looked away, every time they let it happen." Then the water surged up. Hands reached out from below, and Edith woke screaming. On the 3rd morning, the fog did not lift. Instead, it thickened, choking the sky, swallowing the manor, bleeding into every crack and corridor. But Edith was no longer willing to stay passive. Something inside her had awakened. The fear was still there, but behind it, fury. They had been lied to. The family history was a veil. The journals only told part of the truth. Mercy Blackthorne may have been executed, yes, but she was remembered, feared, blamed. The unnamed, she had been erased. And something inside the house wanted that erasure reversed. They left the manor at midday, with Henry unconscious in a cart wrapped in blankets. Mrs. Calloway came too, walking slowly, leaning on a cane she had taken from the hall, a cane that once belonged to Nathaniel Witherell, the last man to see the unnamed. The village of Withers Hollow was 3 miles downhill, through a winding road flanked by skeletal trees. It was silent, not empty, silent. Shutters were closed, doors locked, no smoke from chimneys, no footprints in the snow. But they were being watched. Faces flickered behind curtains, whispers echoed where no mouths moved. When they reached the old chapel, Alistair stopped. "It's boarded up." And it was. Thick iron nails sealed the doors. Chains looped across the entrance, twisted with dried bramble. A plaque stood to the side. The engraving had been deliberately scratched out. But beneath the damage, one word was still visible. Mercy. Mrs. Calloway pulled something from inside her coat, a rusted iron key shaped like a serpent swallowing its tail. She didn't explain how she had it. They broke the chains. The doors groaned open. Inside, the chapel smelled of mildew, wax, and something far older, regret. Dust blanketed everything. The altar was draped in black cloth. The pews were overturned, as if a service had been violently interrupted. On the far wall hung a massive painting, covered by canvas. Edith walked toward it. The room chilled as she approached. With slow fingers, she peeled the canvas down. What lay beneath wasn't a painting. It was a charcoal mural etched directly into the stone. And it was monstrous. Children bound, women drowned, a girl with no face, a man holding a gavel while fire consumed a house. Alistair looked away. Edith couldn't. She saw something in that faceless girl, something familiar. Mrs. Calloway whispered, "That's her, the one they wouldn't name." Alistair turned to the altar. "There's a drawer." He pried it open. Inside was a leather-bound book wrapped in twine and sealed with red wax. A sigil was burned into the cover, the Witherell crest upside down. Back in the manor, they opened the book in the drawing room, with Henry lying nearby. The candles dimmed the moment the wax seal broke. The pages were old, brittle. The writing, Latin, then English, then Latin again, was erratic, as if written in haste or in fear. It wasn't a journal, it was a ritual transcript. Massae inversae pro damnatis absconditis, the inverted mass for the hidden damned. Edith translated what she could. This rite was conceived not to bless but to bury, to silence the spirits not by peace but by shame, by removing name, memory, and legacy. The child bore the bloodline, but not the sin. Yet sin was placed upon her as scapegoat. She was offered, not to God, but to silence. "Let her be forgotten," said the elder. "Let her name be stripped. Let her face be erased. Let her soul be chained beneath the foundation of the house." They all went quiet. Then Henry stirred, but the voice that came from his lips was not his. "I didn't want to die." The fire flared. "They made me the altar." Henry sat up, still not himself. He looked around the room with eyes that were too old, too distant. His voice rasped, "You brought the book back. That means you're willing to see, to say it, to remember me." Edith leaned in. "Who are you?" she whispered. Henry's eyes filled with tears, but they did not fall. "I was born Josephine Ruth Witherell. I was 11. I loved the wind. I loved the river. I loved Mercy. She tried to protect me. But they said I carried her stain. They said one witch begets another. And they made me the lock that sealed the curse." The candles all went out. Henry collapsed. In the darkness, the house groaned. Floorboards cracked above them, then below, doors slammed on their own. From deep within the walls, a voice like stone grinding on stone whispered, "You opened the record. You disturbed the seal. The balance is broken. The name is remembered. Now the debt must be paid." The family portraits began to weep black tears. In the distance, the bell tolled again. Not 3 times, not 4, 7. It began subtly. The next morning, the mirror in Edith's room reflected a different version of her. Same features, but older, broken, dressed in black mourning cloth. Her eyes red from crying. When she blinked, the reflection did not. Down the hall, Alistair opened a window and saw the same horse-drawn carriage arriving 3 times in a row, like a scene on loop. Each time, it carried his father. His father, who had died 30 years ago in an asylum, mumbling about voices in the walls. In the parlor, the Witherell family portraits had changed. Each canvas now showed the subject's moment of death. One man hanging from the ceiling beam. A woman drowned in a clawfoot tub. 2 children locked in a wardrobe, their eyes wide and lifeless. The plaque beneath Josephine's blank frame now read, "Josephine Ruth Witherell. Sacrificed, forgotten, remembered." That evening, as storm clouds swallowed the manor and the windows began to frost from the inside, Mrs. Calloway brought out a single candle and placed it on the floor of the dining room. "We're not performing a séance," Alistair said, voice clipped. Calloway looked at him with something between pity and quiet accusation. "You misunderstand, child. This isn't to call them. This is to stop them from coming all at once." But the moment the candle was lit, the chandelier above them began to swing. Then the whispering began. From the walls, from the floorboards, from inside their own mouths, as if their lungs had become echo chambers for ancestral guilt. Henry stood in the corner, whispering to himself in Josephine's voice, "They buried me with a silver coin in my mouth, so I couldn't speak in death, but I've swallowed it. And now, I speak again." At midnight, each of them experienced it. Edith stood in Josephine's shoes on the altar of the chapel. She looked down at her small hands bound in rope and saw the faces of her accusers, uncles, aunts, her own grandfather. They said she had fire in her eyes. They said she made the milk curdle. Alistair saw himself as Nathaniel, holding a torch in one hand, a hammer in the other, as he nailed shut the attic door. Behind it, sobbing, scratching, a child. "Forgive me," he said. "You're the price we pay for peace." Henry, possessed fully, stood in the grave of Josephine, unable to scream, while black roots slithered around his limbs. Her last thought became his. "Even in death, they kept me underground." Doors no longer led where they should. A stairway appeared that went downward, deeper than the foundation. No one remembered a basement. Shadows moved independently of light. They whispered to each other. Once, Edith caught one smiling. One of the portraits had torn itself, a slit from forehead to chin, and from it blood had begun to drip. Mrs. Calloway finally confessed, "There is no curse. There is only consequence. Every generation has been given a choice. Every generation failed it." She opened her hand. Inside was a silver coin, aged, worn, but unmistakable. This was taken from Josephine's mouth after her death. The original sin was not killing her, it was silencing her. They returned to the journal room. New books had appeared overnight. Books that shouldn't exist. Books that predated Mercy Blackthorne. Alistair pulled one from the shelf. The cover read, "Edmund Witherell, 1691. Inside, "We burned 5. 3 confessed. 1 recanted. 1 sang to the end. The child survived the pyre, but her mind did not. I wrote her out of the family records. Let no one remember her. Let her bloodline end quietly." Another book, Elspeth Witherell, 1720. The swamp swallowed 2 daughters, but I told the neighbors they ran off with lovers. It was easier that way. Better not to ask what lives beneath the mud. Another, Reverend Caleb Witherell, 1767. The storm washed the chapel clean, but the stain remains. The girl with no eyes comes to me in dreams. I wake with nails in my palms. They read entry after entry, confession after confession, buried truths, sanitized histories, a family built on forgetting. And now, the house remembered it all. As the grandfather clock struck 1 a.m., the floorboards shook. A scream echoed from the attic, but no one had gone up, not yet. Mrs. Calloway turned to Edith. "You know what must be done." Edith looked at the coin, the journals. The mirror now cracked with a second reflection behind hers. "Yes," she said, "we finished the story. They found it just after the clock struck 2, a doorway beneath the stairs behind the wood panels of the east wing. It hadn't been there yesterday or any day before. No hinges, no dust, just an opening, clean and waiting. Inside, a stone spiral staircase descending into darkness that tasted of iron, mildew and old teeth." Alistair held the lantern, Edith held the coin. Mrs. Calloway carried the journal wrapped in cloth. Henry followed in silence, his eyes glassy, whispering a song only he could hear. Each step downward pulled them deeper into the past. The stairs ended in a chamber carved from raw stone, a crypt not meant to be seen again. Chains hung from the walls. Crude altars stained black with old blood stood at the center. Shelves filled with bones lined the circular room. This wasn't a family tomb. This was a sacrificial chamber. Edith turned slowly in place. "This wasn't in any record," Calloway nodded, "because it wasn't for the family. It was for what they feared, what they tried to bargain with." At the center of the chamber, a pool, black, viscous, unmoving. Oil, blood, both. From beneath its surface came a heartbeat and a voice, not echoing but emerging inside each of their skulls. "You have read the books. You have broken the silence. Now you must speak the name aloud." Edith stepped forward. She felt the stone floor pulsing beneath her boots, as if the earth itself waited for her words. She held up the coin. "Josephine Ruth Witherell." The pool stirred. "Josephine," she repeated louder, "you were a child. You were not the stain. You were the mirror." Behind her, Henry began to weep, silently, endlessly. "You remember me," the voice said. "Now let them see me." The pool began to rise. At first, she was just a shimmer, then fog, then form. A girl stepped from the black liquid, her dress soaked, her skin pale, eyes hollow but present. Not a ghost, not a demon, a wound made flesh. She looked at Edith first. "You're the first to speak my name and mean it." Then Alistair. "You carry the blood that buried me." Then Henry. "And you are me." Henry collapsed. The water ran from his eyes, his mouth opened, and Josephine spoke through him. "You have 2 choices now. Repeat the ritual and silence me again, or give up the name and everything it owns." Alistair's voice was low. "What happens if we refuse?" Josephine turned toward the walls. They bled. Every surface leaked dark water and voices, screams, confessions, gasps, lullabies, prayers, the entire Witherell lineage crying out at once. Then the house becomes memory, the memory becomes flesh, and it leaves the hill. It will follow every child, every drop of blood tied to the name. There will be no Witherell left, only echoes of guilt. "Mrs. Calloway stepped forward. She removed the cloth from the journal. Wrapped inside was a dagger, carved bone, etched with runes, darkened with time. "I stole this from Nathaniel's hand the night he died," she whispered. "He meant to offer his son to the house, but he failed." She turned to Alistair. "I won't let you fail, not again." Then she turned the dagger on herself and plunged it into her chest. The pool screamed, Josephine wailed, the walls shook, and the lanterns went out. Edith screamed, grabbing Calloway as she fell. The old woman's last words, "Break the name, burn the house." Then she was gone. Josephine stood silently in the black pool, her head bowed. "That was not the price I asked for, but it was honest. I accept it, but only if the house falls tonight." Then she vanished. No scream, no shimmer. Just gone, like a memory finally released. The staircase had changed. Each step back up aged them, not physically, emotionally. They felt the weight of 2 centuries settling in their lungs. When they emerged into the manor again, it was no longer night. It was dawn. But the sky was black. The snow had stopped, and the house was watching. Every painting's eyes were turned toward them. The doors were locked from the inside. The house was ready to be sealed in flame, and they were the only ones who could light the match. The storm had passed. But the morning that greeted the Witherell survivors was not one of peace. The sky was wrong. A deep crimson bled through low clouds. Snow no longer fell, but the air was thick with ash, floating gently like cursed confetti. Edith stood at the parlor window, arms folded tight, staring out across the frozen landscape. The trees that once stood tall and proud were now twisted, as if writhing in silent agony. The hill itself looked warped, bending inward toward the manor like a scar collapsing on itself. Behind her, Henry sat motionless on the floor, rocking gently. He hadn't spoken since Josephine vanished. Alistair tried to relight the fire, but it would not catch. The logs felt damp, though dry to the touch. The hearth remained cold, unyielding, and Mrs. Calloway's body, still warm, lay on the floor beneath the covered staircase. The dagger was gone. At exactly 6 a.m., the house sighed. A deep groan echoed through the beams, as though the manor itself inhaled. Paintings fell from the walls. Glass shattered in the dining room. A door upstairs slammed shut. Then another, until every room had sealed itself. Edith turned sharply. "We need to leave, now!" But the front door was no longer a door. It was a wall. The wood and brass had fused together, like muscle grown over bone. Henry finally spoke. "It doesn't want us to go." They gathered in the study, hoping to find one last way out. But instead, they found the portrait room. It hadn't been there yesterday. Floor to ceiling, the walls were covered in portraits of Witherell ancestors. But these were not paintings. They were photographic, moving, and deeply wrong. Each figure shifted subtly within their frame, blinking, smiling, watching. Some bled from the eyes. Some held things they shouldn't. Scalpels, blood-soaked books, dolls made of teeth. At the center of the room, a mirror framed in bones, cracked diagonally. And beneath it, a plaque. "The family that forgets becomes the family that feeds." Henry stepped closer. "She said we had to break the name. This is it. This is where it lives." Alistair stared at his own reflection, distorted in the cracked mirror. But the face staring back wasn't his. It was Nathaniel Witherell, the man who nearly sacrificed his son. "It's not enough to burn the house," the reflection hissed. "You have to sacrifice the idea of it, the legacy, the name. Say it. Destroy it." "Destroy what?" "The last Witherell. You." The mirror exploded, sending shards flying across the room. Edith screamed as a sliver sliced into her cheek. Blood hit the wall behind her and was absorbed. A tremor shook the house. One by one, the portraits stepped out of their frames, translucent at first, then solid. Nathaniel, Esther, Ligeia, Josiah. Even Josephine's mother, her face bloated with river water. The room filled with centuries of guilt made flesh. "You would burn our legacy. You would cast away the bloodline that made you. "You ungrateful child." Edith backed toward the door. "You're not family. You're what family did wrong." They lunged. Alistair grabbed Henry's hand and pulled him through the narrow hallway as Edith threw the oil lamp behind them. The fire caught instantly. A hungry roar filled the corridor. The flame wasn't natural. It was vindictive. It fed on portrait eyes, on painted lies. It burned through the house like a memory purged. As they ran through the hallway, the manor fought back. Rooms shifted location, stairs turned to slides, doors opened onto brick, and all the while, the past followed them, not as ghosts, but as living mistakes. They found it behind the nursery, a single wooden door untouched by rot or distortion. On its surface, the witherall crest burned halfway away. Edith reached for the handle and screamed. The metal sizzled her skin. "Blood," she gasped. "It wants blood to open." Alistair didn't hesitate. He pulled a shard of broken mirror from his pocket and cut his palm wide. Pressed it to the door. It opened with a sigh of relief. Behind it, the attic. The attic was filled with objects the family had buried over the decades. A broken music box still playing Josephine's lullaby. The rope used to hang Esther. The crib of the firstborn who never cried. And pages, thousands of pages, of names scratched out, rewritten, scratched out again. Henry walked forward and placed the family ledger in the center of the room. "This is the last lie," he said. And then the wind began to howl. They soaked the attic with oil, piled every object they could, and together they stood in a circle, holding hands as the fire took hold. The last thing to burn was the family name, carved into the beams above their heads. Witherell. Flames erased the letters one by one. W-I-T-H. Until it was nothing. A wall behind them collapsed, revealing open sky, smoke, ash, snow melting into black soil. They climbed down the ruined side of the manor as flames consumed the building from within. By the time they reached the edge of the hill, Witherell House was no more, only fire and silence. Henry turned to Edith. "We could take another name, live another life," Edith nodded. "Then we leave the ashes where they belong." They walked. No money, no name, only freedom. And far behind them, a single voice whispered on the wind, "You remembered me. That is enough." They didn't look back. The fire had consumed the last of the Witherell name, the house, the crest, the books, the lies. Edith, Henry, and Alistair walked west, through snow-covered valleys, past towns too small to care, avoiding names, history, and anything that sounded like legacy. They slept in barns, ate what little they could afford. Henry rarely spoke. For the first time, they were free. But every night, without fail, the dreams returned. And they were always of the attic. Edith's dream was always the same. She's in the attic, alone. The walls drip soot, not water. In the center of the floor, the ledger burns eternally, but never turns to ash. And above her, nailed to the rafters like a crucifix, is Josephine. "You didn't save me," Josephine says. "You watched." Edith wakes every night with soot under her nails. Henry doesn't speak of his dreams. He simply wakes with tears or laughter. And Alistair wakes with a voice in his head that isn't his own. They reached a quiet town in Wyoming. No one asked about their past. They found work easily. Edith in a bakery, Alistair in a mill. Henry, now nearly silent, spent his days walking the tree line behind the boarding house where they lived. But the town had something strange. A bookstore. Small, ancient, filled with dust and books that smelled like soil. And behind the counter sat a woman named Marla. She wore gloves at all times, spoke in half sentences, and never seemed to blink. One day, as Alistair entered the store, she looked up and said, "The fire didn't end it, it freed it." Marla led Alistair to the back of the bookstore. There, On a table sat a book bound in what looked like skin. Its title was carved, not printed, The Witherell Record, Volume 2. Alistair recoiled. "No, we burned everything." Marla smiled thinly. "Did you? You burned the house. But what if the curse never lived in the walls? What if it lived in you?" He turned the first page. It was a perfect present tense account of everything that had happened, all the way to last night, and the final line was blank, waiting to be written. That night, Henry did not come home. Edith and Alistair searched the woods. His footprints stopped abruptly in the snow. No drag marks, no blood, no sign of struggle, just a single word carved into a tree. Below. Alistair paled. "He's dreaming while awake." Edith stared at the word and whispered, "Or someone else is dreaming through him." Now they went back to town for help, but everyone changed overnight. The shopkeeper stared too long. The school teacher asked Edith, "Do you bleed like they did?" The pastor said, "You should have died with the others." Alistair confronted Marla. "You said it was over!" She blinked once and handed him a page. "Legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what follows you." Then she laughed, a sound like dry leaves. In the woods, they found a door. Just a door. Standing upright. No walls, no roof. But behind it was sound. Muffled crying, scraping, and the tick of a grandfather clock. Edith reached for the knob. It turned by itself. They stepped through and into a room that should not exist. It was the attic of Witherell House, identical in every way. Only it was perfectly clean. No fire, no rot, no ledger. In its place, a cradle. Inside, Henry, eyes open, smiling. "She said I could stay if I let her wear my name," he whispered. Behind them, the door slammed shut. A figure stepped from the shadows. Not Mercy Blackwood, not Josephine, but someone in between. Her face shifted constantly. Witherell matriarchs, daughters, mothers, sinners, saviors. "You thought fire was enough?" she asked. "Fire cleanses, but fire feeds too." Alistair stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I'm what the curse became when it had no house left to haunt. I'm the last story you'll never tell." She raised a hand, and Henry vanished into the cradle. "You can stay here," she said. "Let your memories keep you warm, or you can walk back through that door, leave the boy, and never speak this story again." Edith shook. "Why?" "Because remembering spreads it." Alistair whispered, "That's why the book is still writing itself." Edith looked at her brother, at the cradle, at the door, and finally said, "We choose to remember." They overturned the cradle. The room screamed. Alistair set the floor ablaze with a match pulled from his coat. The figure convulsed. The cradle shriveled. The attic cracked. Edith carried Henry, lifeless but breathing, through the burning doorway. And they woke in the woods, covered in ash, surrounded by snow, and with no door behind them. Henry would never speak again, but he lived. Alistair wrote every word of what happened, and Edith swore she would never let the book be hidden. 3 weeks after escaping the false attic, a letter arrived. No postage, no name. Just an envelope on the windowsill of their cabin in Oregon. Inside, a single sentence: "You left one Witherell alive." And beneath it, a name none of them had spoken aloud in months. Eleanor Witherell. They found her outside Missoula, Montana, living alone. But she wasn't hiding, she was waiting. Eleanor Witherell, cousin to Henry and Edith, had been adopted out before the family fell. She'd changed her name, married, buried her past, but she'd also kept something. A mirror from the original Witherell manor, etched with ash, and when Edith saw it, she staggered back, because in the reflection, she was still in the burning house. That night, the mirror pulsed. Alistair approached it, foolishly, alone. In its glass, He saw every version of himself, but one stepped forward, older, wearing the family crest, standing in the ruins of a town. "You didn't destroy the curse," the mirror Alistair said. "You inherited it, and you passed it on by writing it down. You gave it a name again." Alistair stumbled back. He tried to burn the mirror. It didn't catch. Margaret Witherell's original diary, believed lost in the fire, was in Eleanor's basement, untouched, unburned. It had grown. What was once 200 pages was now over 1,000. Some were blank, but many described future events, names of children not yet born, dates of deaths not yet happened, places they had never visited, yet somehow already cursed. And on the final page, "To bury the dead, you must kill the name, all of them, every last drop." They made one last choice, one final confrontation, a meeting. In the cemetery where the original Witherell patriarch, Arthur Witherell, had been buried. Only 4 of them remain now: Edith, Alistair, Henry, silent ever since the cradle, and now Eleanor. They gathered at midnight. Each brought something. Edith, the book; Alistair, the mirror; Eleanor, a vial of her own blood; Henry, silence, and the knife from the attic. The mirror showed their faces. All of them aged, exhausted, fractured. The book pulsed with heat, and from the grave they heard something rise. Not a ghost, not a voice, but an invitation. "Finish it." Eleanor stepped forward. She recited the line from the book, "We carry what we did not choose, but we choose now to carry no more. Let this name die, unloved, unspoken, unworthy." Alistair broke the mirror. Edith tore the pages. Henry took the knife and cut his own palm, then held it over the grave. "I carry the name," Edith whispered, slicing her hand too. "And I let it go." They poured their blood onto Arthur Witherell's tombstone. The wind stopped. The trees bent. The earth hummed. And the gravestone cracked, split perfectly down the center. The name Witherell eroded instantly, as if it had never existed. The wind returned. The air warmed. Henry spoke, his first word in months. "Done." And the night went still. They scattered. Eleanor vanished into the mountains. Alistair moved to Nova Scotia. Henry and Edith changed their names again and took a vow never to speak of the Witherells again, never to pass on the bloodline. But the diary remained, what little was left of it, and the final written line. The curse ended not when the fire burned, but when we stopped believing it was ours to carry. 20 years later, a book was published. It's titled The Blood That Won't Boil, A Family's Escape from Legacy, by E.M. Harlan, a pen name. Some called it fiction, others saw too many details, too many names. A reviewer wrote, "It reads like truth, not fact, but truth," and it left me cold for days. Some claimed the book disappeared from shelves, that it was banned in parts of Massachusetts. But sometimes in winter, when snow falls silent, people say they hear the tick of a grandfather clock from the ruins of a house that no longer exists.